There was a time when just the name John D. Rockefeller would make anyone shake in their boots. He wasn't just the world's first billionaire, but one of the richest dudes in history. His empire, Standard Oil, became the most dominant monopoly on the planet, brutally crushing competitors, taking control of multiple industries, bribing the government, and treating business like it was war. Because of his ruthless practices and shady deals, Rockefeller made a ton of enemies. His career is full of bitter rivalries, like with Andrew Carnegie, and even fierce battles against US presidents. But before he was the oil industry titan, Rockefeller was at rock bottom. His story is one of those rare cases where someone manages to climb from the depths of poverty to the absolute peak of wealth and power. Rockefeller's journey is sometimes inspiring and sometimes downright chilling. It's an example of what happens when greed and ambition go completely off the rails. So, fam, let's go back to 1839, when a young John D. Rockefeller was born into poverty. I bet you don't know what he did to earn his first pennies. John D. Rockefeller came into this world on July 8, 1839, in Richford, New York. But don't think he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. On the contrary, fam, the Rockefeller family could barely put food on the table. His dad, William Avery Rockefeller, was a real character. Known as Devil Bill, the guy was a mix of a traveling salesman, fake doctor, and believe it or not, a bear trainer. That's right, you heard me. Once, he won a bear in a competition and taught the animal to do tricks. But what he really did was disappear for months, leaving the family high and dry. Meanwhile, John's mom, Eliza, was busting her butt to raise the kids. She had little John working in the fields from an early age. It was there, with his hands in the dirt, that the boy learned the value of hard work and discipline. But young John wasn't content with just farm work. At 7 years old, he was already eyeing opportunities. You know what he did? He started raising turkeys. That's right, fam. The kid followed a wild turkey to its nest, took the eggs, and raised the chicks. Then, he sold some and kept others to continue the business. At 7 years old, he was already thinking like a businessman. John's childhood was a roller coaster. One day, his dad would come back with expensive gifts. The next, the family had nothing to eat. This instability shaped young Rockefeller's character. He swore to himself that one day he'd have total control over his financial life. At 13, the family moved to Cleveland, Ohio. That's where John got his first, real, job. He scored an internship as an accounting assistant in a small company. The salary? You don't even want to know. But what mattered to John was the experience. Every day before going to work, John would repeat to himself, "I'm destined to be rich." It wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a promise he made to himself, a mantra that guided every decision he made. And it was during this time that John did something that would change his life forever. He started writing down every penny he earned and spent in a small black book. This habit of personal accounting would become one of the foundations of his future success, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. At 16, John faced his first big challenge in the business world. He wanted a better job and spent 6 weeks knocking on doors at the biggest companies in Cleveland. You know what happened? He heard no from everyone. But that didn't break his spirit. On the contrary, it only made him more determined. Fam, let's catch up. After getting so many no's to the face, John didn't give up. On September 26, 1855, he finally landed a job as an accounting assistant at Hewitt-Tuttle. You know what he did? He celebrated this day for the rest of his life, calling it his personal Labor Day. This shows how much the guy valued every opportunity, but John wasn't just any employee. At only 16, he was already doing the work of guys much older than him. The boss was so impressed that he raised his salary from $50 to $300 a year. Talk about a jump. John was meticulous to a fault. He created a system to organize the company's accounts that was so efficient that clients started asking him to handle their finances too. The kid was becoming a legend in Cleveland accounting, but then came the crisis of 1857. Many businesses went belly up, but John saw an opportunity. He had saved $950, a considerable chunk of change at the time. And that's when he decided to make his big move. At 20 years old, John teamed up with Maurice Clark, a 28-year-old guy, and they opened Clark Rockefeller. The business? Buying and selling grains, meat, hay, and various products. John was the financial brain of the operation. The partnership took off. In 1860, the company made $450,000. To give you an idea, that would be equivalent to over $14 million today. And all this before John turned 22. But then came the Civil War in 1861. Many people thought it was the end of business, but not our John. He saw another opportunity. His company started supplying the Union Army. Profits exploded. John was so dedicated that he worked 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. He said, "I was too busy making money to get into much mischief." While other guys his age were living it up, John was building an empire, but it wasn't all roses. John faced his first big business crisis in 1863. One of the suppliers tried to pull a fast one on him, delivering an inferior product. You know what John did? He sued the guy and won the case. This showed the market that he wasn't to be messed with. John's success at Rockefeller was just the beginning. He had his eye on something much bigger. And that's when he met Samuel Andrews, a chemist who had a revolutionary idea about oil refining. Fam, now things are gonna get even crazier. In 1863, John and Maurice Clark decided to invest $4,000 in an oil refinery with Samuel Andrews. It seemed like just another business, but it was the beginning of something huge. Oil was booming at the time. You know why? Because kerosene, which comes from oil, was used for lighting. Everyone wanted it, and John, with his sharp eye for business, realized that refining oil made a lot more money than selling grains and meat. In 1865, John made a decision that changed everything. He bought out the Clark brothers' share in the refinery for $72,500. For the time, it was an insane amount of money. Many people thought he was crazy, but John knew what he was doing. He renamed the company Standard Oil and started applying his efficiency techniques. The guy was obsessed with cutting costs. He even used empty oil barrels to make the office tables and chairs. John never stopped innovating. He hired his own plumbers and coopers to make the barrels, bought land with timber to make the boards, and even started manufacturing his own tools. All to reduce costs and increase profits. By 1870, Standard Oil was already the largest refinery in Cleveland. But John wanted more, much more. He started buying out competitors. And it wasn't just with cash. The guy was a master negotiator. One of his tactics was to show the owners of other refineries Standard Oil's accounting books. When they saw how much John was profiting, they went crazy to sell and get in on his business. But not everyone was happy with John's success. Competitors started complaining about his aggressive tactics. And that's when John hatched an even more ambitious plan. In 1871, he created the South Improvement Company. It was a scheme to control not just the refining, but also the transportation of oil. John made secret deals with the railroads to get massive discounts on freight. When the news leaked, it was a scandal. Oil producers were furious. There were even threats of violence against Standard Oil. But you know what John did? He turned the crisis into an opportunity. Fam, now things are really gonna heat up. After the South Improvement Company scandal, John D. Rockefeller didn't back down. On the contrary, he doubled down. In 1872, John launched an offensive that became known as the Cleveland Massacre. In just 6 weeks, he bought 22 of the 26 competing refineries in the city. How? He used a mix of veiled threats and offers they couldn't refuse. John would go to the refinery owners and say, "You can sell for a good price now, or wait and be crushed." Many sold on the spot. Those who resisted, he bought for less later, when they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Standard Oil grew so much that John needed a new way to organize everything. In 1882, he created the Standard Oil Trust. It was basically a giant company that controlled several smaller companies. A revolutionary concept at the time, but John didn't stop there. He started expanding to other states: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Standard Oil was everywhere. By 1904, the company controlled 91% of oil production and 85% of final sales in the USA. John's success was so absurd that he became the first billionaire in history in 1916. To give you an idea, his fortune came to represent 2% of the entire American economy. But with great power comes great trouble. The government started keeping an eye on Standard Oil's monopolistic practices. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, aimed directly at John's tactics. John tried to defend himself. He argued that Standard Oil had grown naturally, offering better products at lower prices. But not everyone was buying that story. In 1911, the final blow came. The U.S. Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil to be split into 34 smaller companies. It seemed like the end of John's empire, right? Wrong? In a plot twist worthy of a movie, the division of Standard Oil ended up making John even richer. The stocks of the new companies skyrocketed, and his fortune tripled. So, fam? Think John just sat back and enjoyed the money after this? Well, get ready, because what he did with all that fortune is something that changed the world in a way no one expected. In 1913, John created the Rockefeller Foundation. But don't think it was just for light charity. The guy went all in. He donated more than $500 million in his lifetime. That would be equivalent to more than $10 billion today. But John wasn't just throwing money at problems. He applied the same techniques he used in business to revolutionize philanthropy. The idea was to attack the roots of problems, not just the symptoms. One of the first targets was hookworm disease, a parasitic disease that affected millions in the southern U.S. The Rockefeller Foundation not only treated the sick but also invested in education and basic sanitation to prevent new cases. John also invested heavily in education. He helped found the University of Chicago and transformed a small medical school in Nashville into the powerful Vanderbilt University. The guy was literally shaping the future of education in the USA, but he didn't stop there. The Rockefeller Foundation funded research that led to the yellow fever vaccine and helped eradicate malaria in Brazil and Mexico. Millions of lives were saved thanks to these efforts. He demanded detailed reports and measurable results. It wasn't just a matter of donating, it was about making the donation yield the maximum. Of course, not everyone looked kindly on John's donations. Some critics said it was just a way to clean up his image after questionable business practices. But whatever the motivation, the impact was undeniable. One of the foundation's most ambitious projects was support for the Green Revolution in agriculture. This movement dramatically increased food production in developing countries, with new agricultural techniques, such as improved seeds and fertilizers, saving millions from starvation. But not everything was rosy in John's philanthropic paradise. Some of the research funded by the foundation, especially in the area of eugenics, later proved to be extremely controversial and harmful. Eugenics was a misguided idea that some advocated of selecting people to have children based on physical characteristics or origin. Today, we know that this is deeply unethical and discriminatory, and rejected by modern science and society. So, fam? Think the story ends here? Well, know that John D. Rockefeller's legacy continues to influence the world to this day, in ways you can't even imagine. First, let's talk money. The companies that were born from the division of Standard Oil? They became giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron. These companies are still among the largest in the world today. John's impact on the oil industry is felt every time you fill up your car, but his legacy goes far beyond oil. The Rockefeller Foundation is still going strong. In 2020 alone, it donated more than $410 million to projects around the world. It's as if John still had global influence, more than 80 years after his death. And you know those universities he helped found and expand? They're still training top leaders and researchers. The University of Chicago, for example, has produced 98 Nobel Prize winners. Not too shabby, huh? The philanthropy model that John created inspired other billionaires. People like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett follow in his footsteps, donating billions to global causes. It's as if John had created a new standard for what it means to be rich and powerful, but the Rockefeller name still generates controversy. Some see John as a symbol of unbridled capitalism, others as a visionary philanthropist. The truth? It's probably somewhere in the middle. One thing's for sure, John's business tactics changed antitrust laws in the USA. Basically, the government had to create new rules just to deal with the empire he built. This affects how big companies operate to this day, and the management techniques he developed. They became standard in companies worldwide. Cost control, vertical integration, aggressive expansion. All of this has a bit of John's touch, but perhaps the most enduring legacy is the idea that great fortunes come with great responsibilities. John showed that being rich isn't just about having, but also about giving back to society. So, fam? Thinking about the impact one person can have on the world? Because John D. Rockefeller's story is quite an example of that. But the question that remains is, what would you do if you had all that power in your hands? The guy started from zero, literally selling on the street, and reached the top. This shows that it doesn't matter where you come from, what matters is where you're going. But don't think it was just luck. John was methodical, and his obsession with details was crucial to his success. The lesson here is clear. Control your money, or it will control you. John wasn't afraid to innovate. When everyone was just extracting oil, he saw that the real money was in refining. It's like instead of fishing, he opened the biggest fish market in town. He didn't want to be just another fisherman, he wanted to control the whole fish business, you know? Now, let's be honest. John's business tactics weren't always very ethical. He crushed competitors and made deals under the table. Well fam, sometimes success comes with a moral price. Is it worth paying? John used all that money to do a hell of a lot of good for the world. He basically invented modern philanthropy. But does that make up for the questionable things he did in business? One thing we can't deny is the guy's long-term vision. Even after Standard Oil was dismembered, John continued to profit. He was always thinking a few steps ahead. And you, are you planning just for tomorrow or for next year too? John showed the importance of adapting. When the government came after him, he didn't cry. He reinvented himself and focused on philanthropy. The lesson? When life gives you lemons, make lemonade and sell it at a premium price. So, fam, what's your opinion on John D. Rockefeller? Was he a visionary who changed the world for the better or a business shark who crossed the line? So, fam, what's your Standard Oil? What empire do you want to build in your life? It might not be a billion-dollar company, but it could be a successful career, a revolutionary project, or even a positive change in your community. Remember, every great business, every great change, starts with an idea and a whole lot of determination. Rockefeller started by selling on the street. Where are you going to start, fam? But if you're thinking, nowadays you can't do that anymore, I made a video for you. The guy revolutionized the digital market, and the coolest thing? He's from right here, the biggest giant on YouTube. The guy is a phenomenon, started from scratch and today makes more than $500 million a year. If you want to know how to create a successful business in the modern world of the digital age, then I highly recommend you watch this next video.